everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Grace of Military Child in Life. Today, I'm here with Michaela, who is an Army brat. So, Michaela, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing well.
Yes. So, tell me what it was like for you growing up as an Army brat.
Okay. So I I guess the main thing I think of is moving a lot. We moved all the time. Making new friends a lot. Um, I guess that was like the main story of everything is like every time we would get somewhere new, we would kind of already be asking like, when are we going to move again? Where are we going next? And
Right.
when we were really little, we thought that was really fun.
Yeah.
So
Because you get to explore and go to new places. And,
yeah.
who wouldn't think that's fun?
Yeah, and I thought it was so normal, like it was like everyone did this.
Right.
And then once I got older, I realized like this is not a normal childhood.
Yeah, because not everyone, has access to the PX and commissary and,
Right.
all those things that we think of as is so normal. And, being a reserve child, I didn't necessarily have access to that. So when I did, I was like,
Ah,
oh, this is fun. And, my one friend and I joked around like our ID cards are like little VIP passes to get us into, those
funny.
fun things.
Yeah. Well, and I was the opposite of that. I was like totally engrossed in the entire like military world. So like most of my friends were, military brats and we just thought that was normal. Like to have the
Yeah.
PX commissary and to ask our friends like, "So where have you lived?" or "Where'd you just come from?" Or like the across the street neighbor, like we knew they're gonna move in a month and we're gonna get new neighbors, and
Right.
that was just kind of normal.
Yeah, the first thing, a lot of civilians, they ask, "Oh, well, where are you from?" And it's
Yeah.
like for military kids, it's like, "Oh, well, where have you lived?" Because
Yeah,
you can't answer where are you from because you're from, even I've only lived in 3 states, but I don't know where I'm from. Like I always say I'm from Cleveland because that's where I was born and I spent a decent part of my life there, but what do you like, it's hard to answer that
it's
question.
that is like the hardest question ever, I think, at least
Yeah,
for me, because I think I've lived in like 9 places. Well, as a kid, 9 places, and as
yeah.
an adult, I've continued to move, but because I was born in Colorado and we left there by the time I was 2. So,
Right.
like, I don't even remember what that was like. And then people would be like, "Well, what about the longest place you lived?" And I'm like, "Well, I lived somewhere for 5 years, but I don't really think I'm from there." Like,
Right.
I don't know. So confusing.
I know, and, it's typically that where were you born? Where have you
Yeah,
lived the longest? And even for me, like, yes, I was born in Cleveland, I lived there for 9 years, and then I moved to Texas and was there for, like, 3 years, but I've been in Florida for a decade now, but I'm not from
right.
Florida, like, I'm from
Yeah,
Ohio, I'm from Texas, I am, partially from Florida, my driver's license is a Florida license, so,
yeah.
it's so hard to be able to pick one spot where, Ohio holds my childhood. I always go back there and I'm like, this is home. This is what feels like home, growing up going to the metro parks and the zoo and all of that. And then Texas like has so many core memories there. And, I was like between 9 and 12 when we were there. So like that's pretty formative years. And then Florida is my entire teenage and young adults. So you have that too.
Yeah, I usually identify for the longest time, it was Nebraska because that's where my parents are from, so, like,
Mhm.
we never went on, like, a family vacation really. Growing up, we always every summer and every Christmas went back to Nebraska, but
Right.
then as an adult, when I moved to Nebraska after college, people would be like, "Oh, so which high school did you go to?" or something like that,
Yeah.
and I'd be like, "Oh, well, I didn't. I've actually never lived here." And then they're like,
I'm just here.
yeah. So that got confusing too, but
Yeah,
it's weird.
it is, and, how do you start with listing off all the high schools you've been to? Like, I'm fortunate to have gone to, the same school 7th grade through graduation, but, like, Most kids don't have that opportunity.
No. So, like, I normally when someone asks where I'm from, my first thing is I always just say, "Oh, I'm an Army brat. I'm not really from anywhere.
Yes.
I'm kind of from everywhere," and I just leave it at that. Like, if people wanna know more, then I'll tell them more.
Right.
But, it gets really confusing when it starts going into the high school stuff because I luckily only had 2 high schools. But, that's still confusing because 1, I only went there for 1 year, and I
Right.
don't know. It's just weird.
Yeah. It is, and, I mean, that's always the big thing is you meet someone from, wherever location you're at,
Yeah,
and that's the first question. It's like, well, I was literally at the dentist this morning, and he's like, "Oh, well, what high school did you go to?" And, thankfully, I went to high school locally, so I didn't have to go through that whole
right.
explanation. But if you didn't go to high school where you're living now, then it's like it's a whole story to share of that, and
Yep.
then it's like, "Oh, well, I'm not really from here. I'm just here now. I'm a transplant." So
Yeah, that's yeah, that's basically, like, the story of my life, which even,
Right,
like, in college, when I first got to college, everyone kind of talks about, like, what town they came from and maybe
right.
they knew each other from sports or
Mhm.
something, or, like, knew of each other, and I'd say, "Oh, well, I came from Leavenworth," which is where I graduated high school, and they'd be like, "Oh, well, my friend who's, like, 2 years older than us went to Leavenworth." I'm like, "Well, I wasn't there then, so I know I don't know your friend." So,
Right?
yeah.
And a lot of, it depends on what college you go to. I kinda went to a smaller university kind of local to this area. And so a
Mhm.
lot of people will just graduate high school and go straight to Florida Gulf Coast. And so, you know, it was just that transition, and so it's not like, where I'm at now, which is University of Alabama, where everyone goes from everywhere, to go to
Yeah.
this prestigious college. Really, if you play basketball, then you'll wanna come to HBCU, but that's about it. So, um, but, you talk to these people and it's like, "Oh, well, where did you grow up?" And it's like, "Okay, well, I know you grew up here. I know you spent your whole life living in Lee County, but I did not. I
Right.
spent it in Cuyahoga County and Bexar County, and, I'm from all over, and um, I'm done with here, like, I'm ready to move on again, like, being here a decade has been too long."
I That's how I am. I get a little bit restless. I'm better
Yeah.
than so I have a sister who is a year younger than me, so moving kind of made things easy for us because 'cause we're, like, built-in friends, but
Yes.
she's way more restless than I am, like, she moves a lot. As an adult, I've only moved, like, 4 times, so
Yeah.
that's I think that's reasonable.
It is. For military kids, it's reasonable.
Yeah.
For, talking to civilians, they're like, "You've moved 4 times as an adult?" Like, it's a different
Yeah.
conversation there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm definitely that restless person, and I compensated a lot by traveling and just going
Oh,
to
yeah.
new places, going exploring. And, military kids, we have friends all around the country, all around the world, so it's like
Yeah.
you have somewhere to visit
Yep.
everywhere you go. And so last year I was really, really restless, and so I was just every single month, and I kinda did my trips overlapped, but every single month I was somewhere. Like, there was only 2 months that I wasn't on a flight, so I was like, just checking off all the boxes, visiting people I hadn't seen in, like, a decade, and so it's really cool to be able to do that, but then, yeah, that restless, like, I've had the itch to move, like, after 3 years of being here, I was like, "Where are we going next?" Like,
Yeah.
it's been too long
Yeah.
here.
And it's really cool to have the military brat thing, to have friends everywhere.
Yeah.
I think I confuse people when I'm like, "Well, my friend who lives in this place and my friend who lives in that
I
place," and they're like,
agree.
"How do you have friends in, like, every state or every region?" And
Right.
I'm like, "I just do." That's what
Right,
happens.
and it's funny because, like, I was thinking about this the other day, like, I only have, like, maybe 1 or 2 friends local, like, that's
Mhm.
it. Like, I have a handful of friends, and
Yeah.
I was always the one, because on a military base, you connect with everyone. In 6th grade, I knew every single person in my 6th grade class. And, we were a smaller group of people, but we still all knew each other, like passing by in the hallway. We knew each other by name. Um, and so I was definitely a social butterfly. And so here, coming in saying, "Hey, yeah, I haven't lived here at all in my life." I'm from Ohio, I'm from Texas, I'm now from Florida. Everyone has their cliques already and their friend groups, so it's hard to fit into that. But, most of my friends, I have friends in North Carolina, I have friends in Washington, I have friends in Texas, I have friends in Ohio. Like, literally, they're all over the place. And, like, maybe two of them are, local to here. I have friends of other places, other parts of Florida, but that's like, 6 hours away still.
Yeah. I think that's something that as an adult, I didn't think would be as hard because
Yeah,
as a kid, we made like I moved so much, I made so many friends. I thought, okay, I'll just keep doing that. But
right.
then like, as an adult, it's very different to try and make friends, I guess, than it was as a kid. And you don't
Yeah,
have like those built-in things like school or sports or whatever it is, like that you have to become friends with them because they sit next to you in class every day, so you become friends
yeah,
with them or stuff
yeah.
like that. That has been a little bit harder for me as an adult for sure.
Yeah, because like I said, everyone grew up knowing each other. Most people, if you live your whole life in one spot, you're very less likely to move
Yeah.
out of that area as an adult.
And that's
So,
where I live now is a really small town in Iowa. So everyone already knows each other. Like everyone
right.
knows everything about each other. I teach at the rec center. I teach group fitness. And like I teach a lot of the silver sneakers, so they're seniors. They'll come in and they'll start asking me questions about where I'm from and stuff. And like their son will have gone to high school with my boss who's in her 50s. So like they've
Oh
known
my
her
gosh.
entire life. And I'm
Yeah.
like, they've known me for like 20 minutes. I'm like, it's so like it at first it took me a little bit like, why is it so hard to make friends here? I'm like, oh, because everyone's already known each other for 50 years or however long they've been here.
Yeah, and I'm sure it might be a little less common in Iowa where you are, but it's such a good feeling when you find somebody else who's a military brat
Yes.
who because you just instantly connect with them. And even
Yeah.
to this day, as a young adult, like going to events and stuff and um I'm fortunate, but not so fortunate of the whole situation. But my dad was injured, so we have, a lot of organizations who are there to support us, fortunately. And so, bringing us to these events where, I'm just surrounded by military kids who have been through what I've been through, it's so great to be able to say, "Hey, like, I'm finally around, my people, my type of
Yeah.
people." And it's rare, you know, depending on where you live, to find people who are like that, but it's such a good feeling when you find another military brat, no matter the age difference, I
It
can
really
talk
is.
to somebody in their 70s or 80s, for hours about being a military brat.
Yeah, it really, really is. It's and I've barely found it here, but I mean, I talk almost daily to one of my army brat friends that we
Yeah.
live I think we lived in 3 different places together. So, like, her and I have just been friends since 2nd grade off and on, but we
Yeah.
still text almost every day. So, like, those are mostly like, friends, like, not saying that people here aren't my real friends, but, like, my
Right.
real friends are, like, those people that I don't know, from childhood that get it, that I can be like, "I don't understand how this works in the regular world," or whatever. I'm like, "Yeah, that was so hard to figure out," like, or
Right.
whatever it is, like, that now that we're kind of kicked out into the civilian world, I guess.
I know, and that's, like, the hardest thing, and I always said for the longest time I never and it's mainly because of the things I've seen and, my dad's injuries and then,
Mhm.
being stationed at a military hospital, you see all of these injuries come through, and we were at the height of Afghanistan, and so, like,
Oh, wow.
2010, through 2012 kinda time frame. And so, seeing guys like 90% burned, seeing amputees, seeing everything, I'm like, I never want to marry military. And then I had a relationship with a Marine And now I'm back to single life and I'm like, I want that. Like it's home, it's
Yeah.
comforting, that when
Well,
people get it, when people understand when you're in, that's it's home. Military, like you
yeah,
said earlier, you're not necessarily from somewhere, but military life is home.
yeah, it is. When I was in high school, I used to like argue when I get in a fight with my parents. I would, because we were had to do some military thing or move or whatever it was, I would be like, I'll never do this to my kids. And multiple of like my high school boyfriends ended up joining the army, which my mom was like, one of them joined while I was still dating him. And my
Oh
mom
my
was like,
gosh.
"Oh, I thought you
Here we
weren't gonna
are.
marry someone in the army." And that didn't work out. So I'm not married to anyone in the army, but I used to always swear I never would. And now I'm like, it probably wouldn't have been the worst, but
I
it's so
know.
funny that I like that was always one of my like high school things I would be so mad about because it would either be curfew because we my friends would have like a later curfew, but to get back on post where I
Right.
lived, I had to get through the gate by 11 and my mom would always, the rule was like we're not coming to the gate to get you, like get
Right.
in. And I would get really frustrated. I'd be like, I'll never make my kids live somewhere that's guarded by this gate. Or
Yeah.
yeah, moving. I had to move my senior year and that was really rough. So
Yeah, senior year is like the hardest move, and it seems to happen to so many people.
yeah, it was hard. I moved my 8th grade year, which was really hard because that's kind of like, I don't know, senior year of middle school and
Right.
then my senior year again. And it was, I really, really struggled with it. And I don't know, I still like, I mean, it worked out because I ended up in Kansas, which is where I went to college and met my husband and all of that. But like,
Yeah.
it was probably one of the harder years of my life because it's just a really hard year to have to move.
Yeah.
And not all my credits transferred, and it was just like a whole
That's frustrating.
struggle. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I always go back to the whole thing of everything happens for a reason. Like, like you said, yes, it sucked having to move your senior year, but you went to college there, you met your husband, like everything happened. But at the same point, like in the moment, you're like, this is the most frustrating thing ever. Like, I am done. I just want to go back to, I want to do whatever it takes not to be in this situation. And then, in the end, you're like, oh, well, everything worked out the
Right.
way it was supposed to, but still, it's so frustrating, especially with the military life, you have 0 control as a child. I mean,
Right.
service members have 0 control about where they move, when they move. You get your orders and you go.
Well, we got really lucky on that move. My dad put in so my dad was up for I think it's War College is where that was.
Mhm.
And you could like go to Pennsylvania, I think is where one is, but that's only like 10 months. And then
Yeah.
you could go to Leavenworth, and that was 2 years. And my sister got through high school and I got through high school, so they were like, let's just try and get one high school move,
Right.
not two high school moves. So I think no, I don't know how that works where you like apply. I don't know. I don't know the military side of it, but I know that they had like pushed really hard to get us to a 2-year war college. And
Yeah.
then I kept saying, I'll stay back here and you guys go
Yeah.
ahead. And then they made me go. But I
Yeah.
understand. I probably could never leave a 17-year-old back, but I tried really
Right.
hard.
Yeah, from the kid's perspective, I have talked to countless people, and I'm pretty sure my dad being one of them of, "Y'all can move, I'm gonna stay here, I'm gonna move in with my friends." Like, you with your
That
friends, you
was
make these
me.
whole plans of how you can stay,
Yeah.
where you are, but, yeah, that never ends up working out very well. I've
No.
never heard a success story from it.
No, it didn't work. I tried really hard because we lived in Fort Stewart is where we were
Mhm.
moving from. And in Georgia, there's something called I think it's called the Hope Scholarship, where if you get like a certain GPA, you can go to like you get your tuition paid at state school or
Oh,
something like that.
nice. Yeah.
I don't remember the details. I could be off, but
It
Um,
probably changed too,
it's
so
something around that. And so I was trying to like convince them, like, if I stay here, then I don't have to pay for college.
yeah.
And my mom was like, no, you're coming with us. But
Like, "No, there's military scholarships, you're gonna be fine."
yeah, pretty much. And then also, my dad had been deployed a lot. So they were like, we're not going to now split us up so you can do your senior year somewhere else. So,
Right. Yeah, and like you said, like, looking back, it all makes sense, but it doesn't make it any easier.
yeah, now it's worked out great. But as a 17-year-old, it was really hard. It was,
Right.
I was
And
talking to
teenagers
my
are
parents about
stubborn.
it. Yeah. Well, I was talking to my parents about it last night, and my mom was like, "Yeah, it wasn't your best senior year." I'm like, "Yeah, but it's okay. It worked out."
Yeah, exactly. I know, I can't military life related and just life in general, related, I look back and I'm like, "Why did, I get so frustrated over something so small
Right,
or, um, whatever the case may be," and I look at it and I'm like, that's because it didn't work out. It didn't work out for a reason. I'm here. I wouldn't have gotten XYZ if that didn't happen. So, everything,
right.
it's the way everything goes. And it's so frustrating at some points, but it's so, it's relieving to know that, you know,
Mhm.
doors that are supposed to close just automatically close, even if it's right in your face.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and military life, just presents so many changes and struggles and challenges, and it gets really frustrating sometimes, but it's so much fun at the same time.
I know it's weird, like, how it's such a weird combination of it all. Because um, my when we lived at Fort Stewart, that was when, we were in, like, the beginning of the Iraq War.
Mhm.
So that, like, it's I don't know, when I, like, see things about that, I it was like it was such a scary time, like,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like, we had so much fun, like, on our street. Like, it was a lot of the times I lived on post.
Yeah.
A lot of times it was just the kids. I was a teenager, so I was always left in charge of, like, the neighbor kids because the moms would be doing whatever they had to do, and all the dads were deployed. And it sounds scary when I start talking about it, but I'm like, we had so much fun at the same time. It's like
Right.
a weird thing.
Well, and it's those
Like,
times where everything sucks. It sucks having a parent deployed.
yeah,
It sucks being in the middle of a war, but it's like we're gonna make the best of this, and I think,
yeah.
military kids just have that we've been through so much, and so we're like, "Alright, well, we're in a bad situation right now, this sucks, but we're gonna make the most of it," and I think we just have that attitude towards so many things.
I agree. And I think I mean, a lot of it also, I have to say, was, like, my mom making like, kind of shielding us a little bit, and letting me and my sister think that my dad worked at a computer, which is what we told people.
That was
We're like,
not
"He's
the
not at the
case.
work, he's at the computer." And people would be like,
The what?
so
How do you
so
get
my mom was
that?
like, "Just let them think that, that's fine." And
Right,
so unless we asked, like, if we asked, she would have told us. But
right,
when we just assumed, she let us assume. And so we weren't worried about, what was happening outside of us. And we were all just like this little unit on our street of, like,
right.
teenagers. There were some elementary school kids, and we were always, like, outside hanging out, and I don't in our own little military brat world.
Right. And that's the fun part too, is like even to this day, you can bond with military kids and no matter, obviously it's different as an adult, but looking back at, children and stuff, like it didn't matter if you are teenagers playing with elementary school kids or vice versa. Like you were all there to have fun. You protected everyone. You watched out for everyone. Not that you necessarily had to do that as a military kid living on post, but you all were there to just get away from, what you're dealing with. And everyone has so many different struggles that they go through, but you kind of all like, I don't know, you bond in a really weird way.
It was definitely, like, a strange bond, which I didn't realize it at the time, that
Right.
as an adult, when I look back, if I start talking about any of it, like, I can tell on people's faces, like, something I don't know, it's definitely a strange bond, and then also, like,
Yeah.
we were all in different friends groups, like, at school, so at school, we didn't really hang out with each other, but we'd all
Right.
come home and just, like, automatically start hanging out, and, like, even at school, sometimes people would be surprised that we were even friends, and then we would come home and be, like, best friends. It was just I don't know how else to describe it besides, like, a really strange bond that we had, and most of us, we weren't, like, old enough to drive yet, and we only had 1 parent home, so, like, we couldn't get driven all over, so it was kind of like,
Yeah.
"You can hang out here on the street."
Yeah. And those friends that you make, like, when I was growing up in Texas, 1, it was just too hot to play outside most of the time, but 2, like, we lived in a circle and we didn't really have many kids in that circle, but, like, we had a few neighbors and, they were older than we were, but it was like, "Okay, well, let's do something. Let's, make something. Let's hang out." And then, I had friends from all over and we would just end up in one spot on base, and we would all just, do our thing, do our kid things, while
Yeah.
the adults did their adult things, and
Yeah.
it's definitely yeah, like you said, I get so many weird looks when I start talking about some things, but it's definitely a lifestyle that 1, you gotta live it to know it, but 2, like, this is why I love talking to people and getting everyone's insight because then you gain so much awareness for it and what we go
Yeah.
through and how we live our lives and why we're, still stick out like a sore thumb as adults.
Yeah.
You can pick out
Yeah.
military kids from a crowd,
A lot of times, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, the last thing I do wanna ask you, though, is what advice would you give to another military child?
Um, oh, this one's such a hard one because everything is always, like, a little bit different. But
Right.
I guess something that I wish I would have realized, like, moving my senior year was, like, what we talked about earlier, is that everything is gonna fall into place. Everything's gonna happen for a reason. You're gonna eventually make friends. You're going like, it's all going to work out, and
Yeah.
that's something that as a teenager, it was really hard to step back from the situation and realize everything's gonna work out and it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
So,
It's the best thing to
yeah.
remember. It's really the only thing that you need to remember as a military kid.
Yeah, because you get really caught up in, like, I'm not gonna get to be captain of the cheerleading squad because I'm moving. I'm not gonna get to, walk across the stage at graduation with my friends. I'm not gonna get to do all of this. But in
Right.
the long run, I have to go and do all the other things as an adult that I wouldn't have been able to do if we hadn't have moved. So,
Exactly. Yeah. I
yeah.
think that's spot on advice.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Michaela, for being on the podcast and sharing what it was like, in your shoes of being a military brat.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff. I could talk about it, like, for hours because
I
I
think
just can't.
most
It's
of us
my life.
can.
Yeah.